It's Wednesday. It's February 8th, 2023. Um, Last night, President Joe Biden put on the State of the Union, which I watched a portion of it, but I'm not going to put that up. But what I am going to reference is what the scrubbed version is on the CBS this morning. Um, and there was commentary. There was the State of the Union from the Democratic led whichever, and then the balance of a Republican member who was speaking, which is the way it just theatrically it makes sense the way that they did it on the coverage of the CBS, from both of their perspectives. And a conversation with Lynn and 19 Anthony from 1975 this morning. Um, they were having some conversation, and my mother made some viewpoint which does not work in Sith analytics for me whatsoever. Right away, like, I'm up in arms, and I'm just like, excuse me, if I can interject with the two of you. I was like, let us just remember when you make those comments that there is a portion of someone somewhere that still has the treasury in mind, and the fact that the forefathers on the photographic recognition of the dollar and where management is somewhere in the world still has an important job to do, while everybody's voicing their concerns about other things, that the crossover in arguments gets really dangerously entangled between, are we talking about a collective consciousness? Are we talking about just one tribe and one situation that's associated with something going on in like a family orientated way? Again, when I hear them speak, I'm just like, oh, I can't witness or record this without interjection. I need like my own conjecture in there, because it is so, with the way that words work and words have power, it really frightens me. So I go from the State of the Union, listening to how they offset one another in the professional broadcasting and social media. Then Live with Kelly and Ryan this morning have this almost jovial way of, I'm looking to my peers, Piers, in a much higher class than I'm in at the moment. Or, and then, and I'm listening to how they're speaking after the State of the Union this morning, for words from that 70s show, since the three of us arrived somewhere in, I believe it's they've arrived in the 70s. And then I reference back to the actual star that I arrived on in numerics. I'm looking for just 1 year offset, but it's in a cluster, technically, in like hyperspace of just gas dots. I know I cloned my own symbolic whatever into another. So, again, in calculating a vacuum of time and space, there is a way of doing it in topology. But anyhow, so I look up um, to Brady, and I realize I never knew, because again, I didn't follow his career. He's got 7 rings. He's a 77, and I'm like, right, and he's like my actual date on the grid system. So I'm like, who do you and then he's involved in this national conference where, if they're making treaty and agreement based on large commission and large numbers for security purposes, and I'm in something referred to as a bird cage, and he's got this symbolic superposition of winning 7, And I have this symbolic creation within a branch of the family tree of duplicating my own star, which is almost in a hyperbolic chamber or vacuum of time and space where nothing else exists except this one link of creation of time, for which then an analysis can be built, or a model can be built, or a model can be analyzed in a very specific manner for whatever purposes that the upper branches of service use this stuff for. I mean, that's the level that I arrived at my contribution to humanity. My problem is this tribute portion and the handling of my actual incarnate body and the arrival of my son and the treatment of our two persons. When this very theologic, very mystical, very important, significant role, I feel, has gone unacknowledged, or acknowledged in a way where it's caused me to be trapped in some form of like a bird cage. And I don't know the politics or the people or the poli science in New York. And it's almost, they've kept me at a distance of some sort for which I can't quite get my I can't quite get my bearings or my Magellan or my Hagstrom like properly put in order. Um, so I'm looking at these three stages of, like there, I have peers somewhere in the entertainment industry. They have power in their social class that they've gotten to. I still have nothing. I have a lot of paperwork. When I analyze the nature of my reality, I can see what they've done, not again, somewhere in the system. And that's where these gender neutral words like they, them, it is a sliding term, because on the actual analysis of what's transpired between the creation of my star and it coming into this part of either universe or galaxy on this one program, and then what I've brought in, again, it's a hyper analysis. It's based on a very specific point in time and space. It has a very specific purpose, and it's, again, like, I don't know, is the word relic? I don't know. It's important. I just don't have access to the level that I feel I need in order for safety measures. Instead, they house me um, with an ongoing. There was a menu item at McDonald's once upon a time. Number 7 was a supersized chicken sandwich, and then it was a choice of beverage, whatever that beverage was. I'm just unclear how I got stuck with some word version of what I used to order in the 90s in my blacksmithed into my future, and by whom, at Birdcage and Possibilities of the Unthinkable, and an insult to my swim team of American fathers, whomever they might be, who may have a job responsibility of looking out for my one person. And that's where the marriage matters most. And the two pieces of paper I have are not like the marriages that everybody wants everybody to stay in the same marriage, in the same lane for some reason. Great, then give me the option I need. That was part of the State of the Union I heard as well, where you can marry the person you love rather than the person that works on paper for some birdcage special op that drags one through the most dangerous situation for no reason, while there are others enjoying a much easier and greater lifestyle, but they don't even have the stars and important measurement tool in order to offset their weighted category for like, why did they all get ladders and do so well while I'm left in the lurch, but yet I have the special capability and special analyzation tool to my person? So here's what the television. So I go from State of the Union at the actual commander in chief who has the bully pulpit. I heard that word the other day. Um, and I'm trying to build a reality of how the others have studied this. And so there's that. And then I go from that to my own age bracket and peer group, which is Kelly and Ryan and what they're speaking of. And then from there, I go to the other peer group, which is in the sports league, kind of a sidestep, and how much champion he has done for our age bracket while I'm caught here in this, what looks like a bird cage. Um, and it has not necessarily been the safest bird cage. There's been alternating effects. And currently, I'm having problem with um, regaining my full mobility, like the ROM, like the range of motion. Um, I mean, I show up, I don't complain. I'm just documenting the physiological effects on a sliding scale of it's getting worse, and knowing that there's so many different variations of countries or outside states that are now populating inside here. I don't know if there's territorial disputes elsewhere that are then causing like poisoning of family members interior. I mean, I'm in a mixed neighborhood of I don't know what. I don't know if there is some Asian culture outside dispute, if their outside dispute is disputing with their interior because of some vice issue that then, I mean, I'm in the same neighborhood, but I'm feeling the effects of this what could be some chaseable um, thing that needs attention to, because I don't want others to get sick. I don't want to be feeling sick this way. I don't want to lose motor function. And I'm trying to get that health paradigm back. I noticed he also did acknowledge not only the loving who you want to love, um, having a relationship like, again, I had originally with Nikki before this crazy donkey and whatever the heck else has gone on with a McDonald and a blacksmith of I didn't this is not this is an insult to my person. It's an insult to my American father's intelligence, and it should have never have been. It's messy. I don't want to talk about it, but it's unacceptable. If you actually have a daughter that you love and you want to see do well, then the results of my life are unacceptable on any paper. So now for reference, this is CBS Mornings E28. And now, like, when I speak to my mother, her response is, well, these are your choices. And I said, no, they were never my choices. Let's be really clear on that. I said, don't start putting words in my mouth and trying to justify the past injustices just for some way to explain it and make it like it's okay, because it's not.
Biden's second State of the Union address, his first in a Republican controlled House. The president spoke about what he believes are his achievements from his first 2 years in office, including some encouraging signs for the economy, and proposed what he called a blueprint to rebuild America. He pleaded for bipartisanship, but parts of his speech were met with heckling from some members of the GOP. Nancy Cordes is at the White House this morning with more on the speech. Nancy, good morning. Good morning, David. Yes, this may have been the rowdiest State of the Union in history. President Biden was literally yelled at repeatedly by some of his opponents. In other ways, though, this felt like a soft launch of his reelection bid, laying out his past accomplishments and describing what he wants to do with the rest of this term.
The President of the United States.
President Biden's second State of the Union address started with a show of bipartisanship as he congratulated the new House Speaker, Republican Kevin McCarthy.
Speaker, I don't want to ruin your reputation, but I look forward to working with you.
But the night quickly took a turn. McCarthy had to shush members of his own party at least 4 times as they booed and interrupted the president when he talked about China, about fentanyl, and when he noted that some Republicans have proposed cutting Medicare and Social Security.
Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion. So, folks, as we all apparently agree, Social Security and Medicare is off the books now, right? They're not to be started. All right.
With re-election likely right around the corner, the president focused on economic bright spots.
Unemployment rate is at 3.4%, a 50-year low.
And he touted the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure law, which is already paying to modernize roads, bridges, and more.
I want to thank my Republican friends who voted for the law, and my Republican friends who voted against it as well. But I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well. But don't worry, I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects.
The president did make one quick reference to the suspected Chinese spy balloon that was shot down off the coast of South Carolina over the weekend.
If China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did.
Attending the address as guests of the president were the parents of Tyree Nichols.
Welcome.
Their son was beaten to death last month. 5 Memphis police officers are now facing charges.
I know most cops and their families are good, decent, honorable people, the vast majority. But what happened to Tyree in Memphis happens too often. Let's come together to finish the job on police reform.
He is simply unfit to serve as commander-in-chief.
Delivering the Republican response was Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She is the new governor of Arkansas and the former Trump administration press secretary.
The Biden administration is doubling down on crazy.
She accused the White House of being more interested in, quote, woke fantasies than in the hard realities Americans face.
I'm the first woman to lead my state, and he's the first man to surrender his presidency to a woke mob that can't even tell you what a woman is.
I was really having a deep discussion with myself in meditation. I was really reflecting on what they've been presenting, my peer group, the older generation, and then going back to like my grandfather's Hollywood, in the black and white, like within that, where my father was too young to really know what was going on, but the grandparents back then were creating something perhaps for the gap of knowledge, or if the course got so far off, to try to recenter and direct the focus of what they expected, and like how to rebuild one's own consciousness if they're completely lost in this whatever that's going on. I mean, for me, I call it a bird cage. I mean, there's safety procedures built in, but there's been whatever. And like, I really don't need the T-Rex getting out of Jurassic Park enclosure and into my protected space. I mean, it's just, but I do need whatever. So there's always like that analogy that I'm looking at between like what's going on in Meso, M-E-S-O, Mesoamerican, and what's with their fight and their pull with the African American. And I'm just like how many layers of fighting are going on all around with absolutely no safety network or structure that I mean, like, it's like that seems to have been some priority, this fight between Latin America or Mesoamerica or Mesoamerican and the African American, putting like the European American on some back burner, but yet that's where the forefathers came from. That's where the money comes from. That's the mint, that's the treasury, that's the republic for which the democracy stands or is centrally whatever. At least that's what they said in some pledge that we had to memorize in the homeschool inside New York. So I'm just going off of what was taught.
One of the most unusual exchanges last night actually came before the president's speech. It was between two Republicans, George Santos of New York and Senator Mitt Romney of Utah. Santos was standing along the aisle. You see him there in that orange tie. Romney reportedly called him a sick puppy and said he had no shame. Take a listen.
Given the fact that he's under ethics investigation, he should be sitting in the back row and staying quiet instead of parading in front of the president and people coming into the room.
Santos, as you may recall, is facing multiple investigations into campaign financing after a barrage of lies about his background and his qualifications were revealed after he was elected. Tony?
A private moment there of disagreement between the two members of Congress. Nancy, thank you very much. We are joined now by Republican Senator John Thune.
That sick puppy mention this morning caught my ear.
Thune of the great state of South Dakota, who is also the Senate Minority Whip. And Senator, we mentioned that private moment. I want to get into some of the topics of this address, but also the tone, because there were public moments of disagreement we're not used to seeing at a State of the Union. The president was called a liar a couple times. There were some outbursts about whether he was to blame for the fentanyl crisis. There were definite Rocky Horror Picture Show vibes at various moments here. And before we get into the content, I'm curious what you think the American people should take away from what they saw last night.
Well, I think, Tony, what they saw obviously was a president. People could characterize it as a soft launch for his reelection campaign. There was a lot of red meat that he threw out there, and the reaction in the chamber was probably pretty predictable. Democrats were very boisterous in their support, and Republicans, of course, not so much. And I think that again, the tone of State of the Union speeches, at least in my the modern era in which we live politically. There is more, I would say, activity in the chamber probably than there used to be. But, I think that's probably characterizes a little bit of the change in our politics. I mean, people are a lot more, they get out there a lot more outspoken. And I think the State of the Union speeches are perhaps a good example of that.
Senator David Begnaud here, good morning to you. There were some moments of bipartisanship, right? The president mentioned more police resources, and he recognized the family of Tyree Nichols. And there were a lot of Republicans who clapped and stood for that. Are Republicans ready to work with Democrats on police reform?
We are, and I very much hope that we could get something done there. There were attempts made in the past, several attempts made in the past, as recently as 2020, which eventually sort of fell apart. But we've got a great leader on that issue. Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina has done a lot of good work on police reform, and he really tried to push that issue forward. And in the end, it was the Democrats who walked away from the table. So yes, there are, I think, about 70 to 80% of the issues around police reform are things that both sides agree on. So what we ought to try and do is find that common ground and see if we can actually execute on getting some reforms across the finish line. I think the opportunity is there, and I hope there will be the will on both sides to put it together.
Senator, on this question of the debt ceiling, there was a moment, and this was one of those call and response moments, where the president criticized some Republicans for wanting to make cuts to Social Security, some changes there. He's referring to a proposal from Senator Rick Scott, someone who I've actually talked to on this subject. But just to be abundantly clear for the American people, where does your party stand on cuts to Social Security and Medicare?
Tony, I think what you heard last night is, both sides agreeing that there aren't going to be cuts to Social Security or Medicare. I do think, however, and the debt limit is a good place to do this, is to actually realize we got a $31 trillion debt. It's not going away. We spend more than we take in every year, and you can't solve all that just by raising taxes, which is, a lot of what the president proposed last night. You actually have to figure out, how do we strengthen these programs? And that doesn't mean you have to cut things, but there are a lot of younger Americans today who understand that if something isn't done, Social Security is going to be around for them. I mean, if you're talking about huge cuts in this program not too far down the road when it goes bankrupt, if we don't do some things to make it stronger and make it viable, not just for current generations, but also for future generations of Americans. And there are things that are out there. There's a proposal out there right now, which is bipartisan. Bill Cassidy, he's got half a dozen Republicans, half a dozen Democrats on Social Security reform. And it does it in a way that strengthens the program, avoids those steep cuts that would occur in the future. And I think it's, that's the kind of thing we ought to be talking about, because both sides have to agree. We can't sustain this. You can't have $31 trillion in debt and climbing every year. And I think the president, if he wants to, this could be a real legacy issue. He could come to the table, and it's going to take presidential leadership to do something big and consequential like this. And I think Republicans would meet him there.
Yeah, well, to see what happens. Strengthening the country for the future is what it is all about. A gentleman in the Senate, Senator John Thune, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, guys.
And in our next hour, Vice President Kamala Harris will join us.
All right, now I go to Live with Kelly and Ryan, S7E110, which is Channel 7, I believe is what their show is on. Today's Wednesday, 2/8. They just, again, for that 70s show, they just had this little banter back and forth. For my peer group being born in the 70s, looking to my peers that I don't have access to on any level other than this television show.
We were talking about this last night, how my father-in-law has a whistle. And if we're in the grocery store together and we get separated, he whistles for me. And that's how I know where he is. Kind of whistle? Yeah, it's like, it's like he makes a sound. It's a very specific Saul Consuelos whistle. I know the sound is not like that.
No, that's for birds. That's my bird. That's my bird's
your bird call.
So watch out. Close the doors.
Yes,
they come
we're
from
gonna
the park.
have puffin eggs later on tonight.
So he whistles for you if he cannot find you in the
If we get
store.
separated.
And you tell me it's a
Whistle.
signature sound.
He's not
Well, that's from the
necessarily
CIA.
whistling for me. He whistles, and I know where he
But
is.
that's a CIA whistle, isn't it?
Oh, 100%.
It's an operative. Yeah, he's secret.
You see, John,
He's secret.
my father-in-law may or may not have been in the CIA. We don't know. He won't admit it.
He won't tell us.
But I have decided that it's a really good origin story that he was in the CIA. And now I'm convinced my husband is also in the CIA. Another guy that won't admit it.
Gary Seacrest,
Also
people
in the
think,
CIA.
was also in the CIA because he'll go right up to the line of a story and then no ending.
And while we're at it, maybe I'm in the CIA. Or am I? Or are you? Maybe John
John's more
is my
likely.
superior. Checking on
So
me.
he's checking on. So you're in the field, and he's at HQ, and he's come in to check on his field op.
As I've said many times here, I'm in the trenches.
Right. Well,
And the generals are just lobbing orders from California.
he's fresh from the State of the Union speech last night. Here he is. Good to have him.
So listen to this. I don't know how often you tell Georgia that you love her, but we tell our dogs we love them all the time. Like we are big.
So that was the first time I've ever heard that little like banter back and forth. It happens to be in my age group this morning. And then I'm going to go from that in the entertainment field and sidestep to 1 week ago today. Tom Brady announced his retirement. Again, I'm not a sports fan. I'm not a sports person. It happened to be on the news. We happen to share the same birth date. I happen to be experiencing a very large problem in New York and not quite sure in my own age group and my own peer group who the safe participants are. Like, who are the good guys in my own upper echelon family tribe? Like, if I'm experiencing at my socially distant and awkward story from the glamorous lives that are portrayed in the whatever. I mean, like, again, the gods of media and social media have been very gracious and kind to Tom Brady. So, for that, I'm sure he is eternally grateful. However, I don't know how to put my hand up and say, cosmologically, you're really close and you're in my peer group of sorts, of whatever. There's this ladder system. Like they say to the children, you could be anything that you want to be. And you have an opportunity to get there in America. Like there was this falsely advertised statement on the television when I was a kid for the small amount of television and in school that they told the children. So if and only if that's true, and I see others gaining access out of poverty into better lives, why was my journey so different? Again, going back to that trapped in this bird cage of sorts. And again, I don't know, is it government security, corporate security, personal security? Is it some other thing that's going on in the wide world of the business office? I don't know. But what I do know is that the journey is off. It has been for some time. And the fact that the only choice of spouse was bad blood. I mean, like I voiced my concern to Nick Klaus when he was in New York on the telephone. And when he was here, every time I would go to see him and visit him on the campus, he would say to me how he used the payphone and he was calling all of his friends to say what a great time he was having. So I don't know how to go from that happy and bliss to then this crazy donkey, which is totally unacceptable. I mean, where is my family member at Nicholas for this?
This is larger than any of us.
Well, talk about deja vu all over again. It was on this day a year ago that future Hall of Fame quarterback Tom Brady announced he was retiring, only to then unretire.
Now, I know somewhere biblically, I don't know what kind of book it's in, there's something about rings. The number 7 is incredibly sacred and sacred geometry. I don't know who lays claim on it. I don't want to start a whole nother set of arguments. I have not been learned, scholared, but I know that it exists, that somewhere in sacred geometrics, they know these things.
Well, can you guess what he announced today? Yes, but this time he says it's for real. Eyewitness News reporter Mike Marsa joining us now with more. Mike.
Well, David, they call him the GOAT, the greatest of all time. His stats could fill a library. 23 seasons in the NFL, 7 Super Bowl rings, and now, yes, 2 retirement announcements. Unlike last year that was filled with drama and speculation, Tom Brady breaking the news this morning with a simple selfie video on social media saying he is retiring for good.
Won't be long-winded. You only get one super emotional retirement essay, and I used mine up last year, so really thank you guys so much, to every single one of you, for supporting me, my family, my friends, my teammates, my competitors. Absolute dream.
The 45-year-old quarterback was still playing at a high level, even setting a pair of NFL single-season passing records playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa's season, though, ended with that disappointing home loss in the wild card round of the playoffs. But Brady was most known, of course, for his 2 decades with the New England Patriots. Off the field, Brady had a tough year, getting divorced from supermodel Gisele Bündchen amid reports that she wanted him to retire from football sooner. So what's he going to do now? Well, Brady has already signed a broadcast contract with Fox Sports, and he just attended the premiere for the new film 80 for Brady in LA. This movie is about 4 women, lifelong friends, who went to a Super Bowl to see Tom Brady play. That movie comes out on Friday. Shirley?
Certainly, it's not the last we've seen of Tom Brady. No. That's for sure. Thanks, Mike. The man accused of attack.
So, again, in not wanting to get stigmatized, I've gone through really a lot of trauma in New York, and they've got the burn pit and whatever that they were working on the front face. I have whatever I was reporting going on in New York. So with not appearing to be like one of these like super celebrity stalkers or whatever, which I'm certainly not. I don't have whatever. There's logic in raising a hand and asking for help from where I'm from. One is to look at the father of the nation at the moment, who happens to be President Joe Biden. And he's the commander in chief, and he has this bully pulpit. Not really sure what that means, but I'm full confidence that he knows what that means. And then there's this State of the Union that he gave, where he reassured that the union is safe because, again, there's investors inside, outside, and a whole lot of security that is integrated in some structure that needs reassurance. And then there is the balance between the Democratic voice and that Republic voice, for which, and I forget her name, I apologize. I know it's Huckabee. But I'm unclear on the words because I don't hear it enough. I don't see any. Today she had a voice on this program, but I don't hear it nearly enough to know what the correct address is in front. So I apologize. And then there's the going from there to peer group, entertainment world, and then, or like TV producer land, and then to sports already produced arena level, because again, I know somewhere in there is a gigantic structure of either universe, a solar system, or whatever that feeds into and plays off of, not just on paper, but in like some real building of whichever that bind. So, I mean, when I sit back and I analyze it quietly, just by myself without speaking to anybody else, and based on what I've seen, I can rebuild the integrated nature and structure of what exists. And so there's that on, and then there's the personal journey that I've gone through, and I've experienced several layers of problems, and how to still say at 40 something, this is still unacceptable. I deserve better than this. I would have served better than this. I'm being underutilized, and I don't know what happened between the beginning stages and where I am now. I do know that when Lewis and I bought a laundromat in Sayville when I first got back from Virginia back to New York, I went to the laundromat to make a deposit. I went to the bank to make a deposit, and we were at Washington Mutual. So WAMU. AMU. And on the floor of the bank, I ran into somebody and he asked to hold Alexander, for which I did. And then he introduced me to someone else that I also did not know. I mean, again, looks familial, but I don't know by name or by sight. So I remember that happened. And it was just like one of these, for me, it was like one of these freakish things. Like, I just walked into a place and here's this once in a lifetime meeting. And there was like the acknowledgement that Alexander, I mean, other than the doctor who delivered him, there's then this chance encounter, I suppose. But then as like time and space moves on, it's almost like it's the connection between the memory and the body is not there. And then there's times where the connection is much more strong. But again, I don't know if that has to do with bigger aerospace and timing and programming issues that are going on at all times. But so that's where my message was today. Is where am I at in this day and age based on this special analysis piece, not knowing who has access to it, not knowing what they use it for exactly, but knowing that where I am and how I'm trapped, I feel trapped here in New York. Again, don't want to be thrown out necessarily into something else that I don't know about, but I also, the way that I'm unable to find an integrated position in some sustainable industry that has access to money. So this way, at least I can build my own freedom. I was watching a commercial about 55 and older communities. I'm like, I'm 10 years out from that. I don't even have a bank account at this point. I have zero money to my name. I haven't been given the same freedoms to even earn, like an American, money in the way that this has been built in New York, or the way that it's been, whatever, handled by I don't know what, and I don't know by whom, but it's unacceptable. And I don't know how to get to something safe, a relationship that I deserve and I should be in. I don't know how to find access to money to file the papers that I need to get far away from Tiafrio 1975. I don't know. I mean, again, there's so many things that have been held from my person. And then now I've got this, it almost feels like a hex on my personal health paradigm, in inability to metabolize and um, and gain health stamina back in the way that I'd like to be. I mean, I'm actively pushing to not have it deteriorate any further. Like yesterday, I went 14 miles and really pushed myself, but I am having trouble walking today. So I don't know where am I doing too much damage. I don't know, and I don't have like a health minister that I could call up and get advice from, because that doesn't exist in my world at this moment. The way that this life frame has unfolded, or the turns that it's taken in topology to get here. And it's unacceptable. It just absolutely is unacceptable. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way universe, galaxies broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.